This book is a prequel to the 2019 Nancy Drew TV show. I don't think a prequel is a very good idea in this particular case because Nancy meets most of the main characters in the first episode. So if the story takes place years ago, then none of the main characters can be in the book besides Nancy. It's just Nancy and people we've never heard of before. Now, I do think there are two time periods which would work well for prequel stories. Last year, when Nancy's mother died and her life fell apart, we saw a bit of that time period on the show. I would like to see a story taking place then. Or we could have a story that takes place when Nancy and George stopped being best friends. That's also a high drama period that we could learn more about. Instead, the book takes place 2 years ago when nothing of particular interest was happening. In hindsight, that might not have been the best decision.
Argo Font Book Review, Argo Font Book Review.
This review was commissioned through Patreon. Horseshoe Bay is about to celebrate their annual Naming Day Festival. The highlight of the event is a play about the local history put on by the high schoolers. Nancy has two best friends in this book, and I have to say, the book missed a golden opportunity by not making her two friends like the real Bess and George. Or a parody of them, that could have worked too. Nancy's two friends are cheerleader Lita Barrow and Daisy DeWitt, who's from one of the town's founding families. The DeWitts are weird, and they rarely leave their secluded house in the woods. When Daisy gets the main role in the play, her parents are furious, and they order her to drop out. A girl named Caroline Mark has a complete public meltdown when she sees the cast list. A teacher named Mr. Stevenson puts his hand on her shoulder, whispers to her, and leads her away. Nancy thinks it's creepy. He's getting far too close for comfort, and I do not like where she's going with this. Chapter 2 is the pointless Cameo chapter, where Nancy visits the Claw, and George is mean to her. Now that we've established this book is based on the show, let's get back to stuff that has nothing to do with the show. Nancy appears to be in charge of the school newspaper. Good for her. There's a meeting with Melanie Forrest, who's important later, Theo McCabe, the emo boy who hates everything, and Parker Wilson, the hot transfer student. He is so hot, Nancy can barely control herself around him. Ooh, Parker. The mystery begins when a raven flies into the window and dies. In its beak is a note that reads, "Beware the naming day curse." Later, Daisy's locker is vandalized with a note that reads, "The curse lives." Both times, Daisy convinces everyone to keep things a secret because she doesn't want to screw up her big performance. Nancy's main suspect is Caroline. She's the only suspect, really. The other two suspects are Theo and Parker, and they can't be guilty because they have a solid alibi. They were in the room with Nancy at the time of the Raven attack. Plus, Parker is way too hot to be guilty. Nancy confronts Caroline. They talk at length about Caroline's alibi for Tuesday, which confused me a bit, because the scene takes place on Tuesday. Normal people would say today or this morning when talking about stuff that happened a few hours ago. They wouldn't use the day of the week. Caroline's alibi is a private meeting with the creepy teacher. Creepy teacher will later confirm this. Nancy researches the naming day curse, which is so obscure nobody's ever heard of it before. The last time it was mentioned is an old newspaper article. Nancy tracks down the author, who explains the town put on a play hundreds of years ago. All of the actors mysteriously disappeared, the culprit was murdered, and the town has done an annual play ever since. That's a grim story, but how is it a curse? That's sort of the main problem of this book. Everyone talks about the curse, but no one has any idea what it is or how it connects to the events of today. The curse idea is too vague to work. Someone writes "beware" on Nancy's dashboard, and Nancy has reoccurring nightmares about birds. She flirts with Parker, and they make plans for a dinner date. Ooh. But at the date, Parker tries to sneak up on Nancy. Why? Is he the culprit? Is Nancy dating a criminal? Someone trashes the newspaper office, and Melanie is kidnapped. Principal Wagner calls the authorities, also known as Chief McGinnis and Nancy's parents. It doesn't quite make sense for the principal to want mom and dad there to discuss vandalism and kidnapping, but it's nice to see them anyway. The chief is unhappy that Nancy's interfering with his investigation. She promises not to cause problems, then she causes problems by lying and keeping information from the police. Typical Nancy. Nancy decides to investigate after school, then the book skips ahead to dinner time, so I guess she didn't investigate after school. Nancy. She discusses the case with her parents, and Parker stops by for an unexpected ice cream run. Best boyfriend ever. He's so great at kissing, Nancy tries her hardest to ignore the possibility that he's the culprit. Chief McGinnis solves the case. Kind of. He proves Caroline is responsible for the vandalism. Creepy teacher lied about her alibi because Caroline had a crush on him. She made a pass at him, and he rejected her romantic advances because it's illegal and immoral for a high school teacher to date a student. Good for him, but that doesn't really explain why he lied to cover up Caroline's crimes. Daisy is kidnapped, which causes a huge uproar. Parker thinks Nancy should stop investigating because he's worried she'll be hurt. Nancy gets snappy with him because she doesn't need his permission to investigate. It's not her job to care about his feelings. When you put it that way, Nancy sounds like a terrible girlfriend. There's a town meeting about the kidnappings where everyone yells a lot. Theo is visibly upset, but Melanie's friend calms him down. Nancy breaks into Melanie's locker at school and sees that it's empty. At this point, Nancy puts the clues together and solves the mystery. If you don't want the ending spoiled for you, stop watching now. Nancy confronts Melanie's friend about the empty locker and how she calmed down Theo. It's revealed Melanie wasn't kidnapped. Melanie has been living out of a hotel for a few days. Why? She wants to be an actress, but her parents want her to be a lawyer. She couldn't handle the pressure, so she fake kidnapped herself. Nancy correctly notes that this is stupid, and she yells at Melanie for causing a mass panic just because her parents don't understand her. Melanie mentions the raven attack. Nancy suddenly remembers that Daisy's family owns dozens of ravens, therefore they are the culprits. Even though there was ample foreshadowing for this plot twist, I still think it's very convenient timing on the part of Nancy's memory. When Nancy tries to rescue Daisy, she is knocked out and tied to a chair. The DeWitts explain the real naming day curse is that tragedy strikes whenever a DeWitt is in the town play. So they threatened, vandalized, and kidnapped Daisy, all to stop her from being in the play and enacting this terrible curse. The weird part is, they never told Daisy about the curse. You'd think they would try talking to their daughter before kidnapping her, but no. They claim they didn't tell Daisy about the curse because they wanted to keep it a secret, which makes no sense. They left several public messages about the curse. That's not keeping the curse a secret. And honestly, how bad is this curse? It sounds like what they did to prevent the curse is way worse than the actual curse itself. Luckily for Nancy, Daisy's uncle left a lantern close by. Nancy kicks over the lantern as a distraction, then she unties her legs. How? Her hands were tied up a few pages ago. How did they get untied? Nancy saves Daisy, and all is well, although Parker correctly points out that Daisy should have known who the culprit was from the start. There's no way she didn't know her family trains ravens. I guess she didn't tell Nancy about it because lying and keeping secrets runs in the family. The end. Postbook follow-up. I thought this book was okay, until the final 13%, where the mystery solution kicked in. That ruined the book for me. I didn't like the mystery solution at all. Nancy solves the case because she has a conveniently timed memory. The culprit scheme doesn't make any sense. and the book skips over the part where Nancy's hands get untied. That's not a good solution. I will say the revelation of the culprits was well done. They are legitimately creepy and dangerous. I was also a bit unsatisfied that Caroline's crimes and Melanie's kidnapping were red herrings unimportant to the story. Did you notice Nancy didn't even try to solve Melanie's kidnapping? Nancy doesn't learn when or where the kidnapping occurred, and she doesn't question any suspects about it. Same with Daisy's kidnapping. Granted, the police were on the case at that point, but it feels like Nancy would try much harder to rescue her best friend. This book certainly feels like an episode of the TV show. There are a lot of scares, and all the characters are incredibly hostile. The ending of the book reveals the curse was real all along, which is scary but makes no sense. Why would the ghost be haunting Nancy if Daisy is the one who's cursed? And how is Daisy cursed for being in the play before the play occurs? I feel like this book would be improved if all the terms and conditions of the curse were laid out at the start, instead of giving zero explanation for what the curse is or how it works. In Chapter 2, Nancy says this year's naming ceremony is the 75th anniversary of the town being named. That's odd. Their town didn't get named until the 1940s? The rest of the book says the annual play goes back centuries. What did they call the play and the town before then? The writing style is pretty good. That's probably the highlight of this book. The reading level's definitely higher than the current Nancy Drew book series. Theo says Nancy and her friends love engaging in cutesy wordplay. Point Theo. Nancy says the word point like that a lot. My e-reader says point shows up dozens of times in this book. Overall, I think how much you like this book depends on how much you like this show. If you want to read something that's a standalone episode of the show, this is fine. It's sort of like that. Just be warned, Nancy's the only character you'll get to see. If you're looking for a mystery with a strong female lead, this is good. But if you want a mystery where all the clues come together in a well thought out way, you should look somewhere else. I give Nancy Drew The Curse a 3 out of 10.